November 20th, 1943, Baishio Island. A Japanese bunker crew heard something that did not sound like the naval barrage, not the deep crash of battleship shells, not the rising whistle of mortars. This was closer, a hard, flat, hammering sound, 20 rounds at a time. The first burst hit the coral in front of the firing slit. The second walked higher. The third came in low and sideways, skipping off the sandbags, the log wall, the crushed coral lip of the embrasure. And before the men inside could decide where the gunner was, the sound stopped. The American had moved. That was the part Japanese training had not prepared them for. Not American courage.
Not American marksmanship. Not even the existence of automatic weapons. Japan had automatic weapons. The problem was worse. America had learned to make automatic fire ordinary. By late 1943, a Marine rifle squad was no longer just a cluster of riflemen with one special weapon behind them. It was becoming a small, moving machine built around the Browning automatic rifle, a 20-round box magazine, a .30-06 cartridge, a weapon heavy enough to punish the man carrying it, but light enough to move with him. And in the Pacific, that mattered more than almost anyone in Tokyo had understood before the war began. Because the war on these islands did not become a contest between brave men and cowardly men. It became a contest between two ideas of infantry. One idea said the decisive thing was spirit, discipline, and the final assault. The other said the decisive thing was whether a single squad could put controlled automatic fire on a target before the target could think. On Baishio, those two ideas met at the mouth of a bunker, and one of them was already obsolete. The Imperial Japanese Army did not enter the Pacific War blind. Its officers knew what machine guns were. They had watched modern armies use automatic weapons since the First World War. They owned light machine guns of their own. The Type 96, and later Type 99, were capable weapons by many standards of the era. The Type 96 weighed about 20 pounds. The Type 99 was heavier. Both fed from 30-round top-mounted magazines. Both could be handled well by trained men. And both reflected a Japanese industrial culture that could produce finely fitted weapons in skilled shops at a level of craftsmanship that impressed even enemies who later captured them. But there was a trap hidden inside that craftsmanship. A weapon can be excellent and still be in the wrong place. Japanese light machine guns were treated as company or platoon firepower. They were important, they were controlled, they were positioned deliberately. They were not thrown downward in huge numbers until automatic fire became the normal language of the rifle squad. In the American system, the BAR moved closer and closer to the smallest unit of battle. By 1943 and 1944, Marine fire teams were increasingly built around it. One BAR in a squad was useful. 3 BARs changed what a squad was. Instead of riflemen waiting for a support weapon to help them, the automatic rifle became the point of the spear. Riflemen protected the BAR gunner, fed him magazines, watched his flanks, and maneuvered around the fire he created. That meant the first seconds of contact changed. A Japanese rifleman with an Arisaka could be skilled, calm, and brave. He could fire a careful first shot. But after that shot, he had to work the bolt. Lift, pull, push, lock, re-aim. In those same seconds, an American BAR team could throw an entire magazine into the opening of a bunker, a tree line, a trench lip, or a cave mouth. Not sprayed wildly, not wasted for noise. Short bursts, move. Short bursts, move again. That rhythm was the shock.
And it showed itself before Tarawa. On August 21st, 1942, near the mouth of the Ilu River on Guadalcanal, Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki sent his men into a night attack that belonged to an older world. His troops expected violence, shock, and closeness to decide the fight. They had reason to believe this. Japanese infantry had already won terrifying victories in Asia by moving aggressively, pressing hard, and breaking formations that could not absorb the charge. The doctrine was not a fantasy invented by fools. That is what makes it dangerous. It had worked. It had worked against armies that lacked the same density of automatic fire. It had worked against enemies whose lines could bend, panic, or collapse under the pressure of men closing in the dark.
Then Ichiki's men reached a marine line that did not behave like those earlier lines. It did not break. It lit up. Machine guns held the center. Rifles filled the gaps. BARs gave the line something different. Mobile bursts, shifting points of fire, automatic weapons that Japanese attackers could hear but not easily fix in one place. A muzzle flash appeared. Men charged it. By the time they reached it, the gunner was gone. That night did not prove that Japanese soldiers lacked courage. It proved courage had been assigned the wrong job. Of Ichiki's force, only a fraction survived, and after Guadalcanal, Japanese commanders began learning. That matters. The story is not that Japan refused to adapt at all. The story is that Japan adapted tactically to a structural problem. That is different. By Tarawa, Japanese defenders had stopped assuming every battle would be won by charging into the enemy. On Baishio, they built a fortress. Palm logs, coral, concrete, firing slits, interlocking fields of fire, positions that could survive bombardment. The island was small, but the defense was not simple. It was designed to make Americans pay for every yard. And they did. Tarawa became one of the most shocking American victories of the war. Nearly 4,700 Japanese troops and laborers were killed, and the fight for Baishio burned itself into American memory because so many casualties were packed into roughly 76 hours. But beneath the horror of the landing, another pattern was becoming visible. Once Marines got close enough to the strong points, the BAR helped turn tiny openings into lethal doors. The weapon was not a cannon. It did not blow bunkers apart. It did something more intimate. It controlled the seconds when a defender tried to look out, aim, and fire. A BAR gunner could work across a slit, pause, shift, and fire again before a man inside knew whether the next burst was coming from the same angle. And when the fight moved into cave mouths and enclosed positions, the .30-06 round gave the weapon another effect. Inside rock and concrete, bullets did not always stop where the shooter aimed. They skipped. They broke angle. They ricocheted through air that suddenly had no safe corner. Marines learned to fire into openings from off to the side, not standing straight in front of the entrance, but oblique, low, and far enough back to survive the return fire. One 20-round magazine could turn a cave mouth into a box of moving metal. The Japanese answer was to dig deeper, and again, that answer was intelligent. On Saipan, in June 1944, the defensive system was more mature than Tarawa's. The terrain helped the defender. Caves and limestone pockets gave Japanese troops concealment that no open beach could provide. General Yoshitsugu Saito's men had months to prepare, and they did not simply repeat Baishio. They built positions that supported one another. They cached ammunition. They chose firing angles more carefully. They tried to make every American movement expose itself to another hidden gun. A bad army does not build a defense like that. A stupid army does not force the United States to pay so heavily for ground it can barely see. But even a better cave system did not solve the distribution problem. By Saipan, the Marines were carrying more automatic fire at the squad level than Japanese doctrine could answer with an equal habit of its own. The difference was not just what was on the beach. It was what was behind the beach. American factories could make weapons in numbers Japan could not match. New England Small Arms, a consortium of civilian manufacturers, became a BAR producer. IBM, known for business machines and precision office equipment,
turned part of its industrial discipline toward the same gun. That detail matters, because the Japanese military did not just face American soldiers. It faced the ability of American civilian industry to become military industry without losing scale. A company that made machines for offices could help make weapons for islands. A shop that knew gauges, tolerances, fixtures, and repeatable parts could be pulled into a war economy and made useful. Japan had skilled arms makers. America had a system that could multiply skilled work until it became routine. That was the silent weapon. Not the BAR alone. The habit of making the BAR replaceable. If a Marine's weapon broke, another could come forward. If a magazine emptied, more magazines followed. If a squad realized one automatic rifle was not enough, it wanted 2, then 3, then as many as it could carry. The paperwork could lag behind the battlefield. The battlefield did not wait. Japanese units rarely had that freedom. A platoon commander could not simply decide that his men needed more Type 96s and pull them out of a supply chain that barely had them. The weapon existed. The density did not. And density was what the Pacific demanded. On Iwo Jima, the Japanese tried the most serious answer of all. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi did not defend the island like earlier commanders. He understood what happened when men charged American lines under automatic fire. So he forbade wasteful banzai attacks. He built depth. He built patience. He built an island under the island. 11 miles of tunnels connected pillboxes, caves, command spaces, firing points, storage areas, and routes of movement invisible from the surface. Japanese soldiers could fire from one position, disappear underground, and reappear somewhere the Marines thought had already been cleared. That was not fanaticism alone. That was engineering. And it made Iwo Jima terrible. The black ash swallowed boots. The beaches jammed with men and machines. American bombardment tore the surface open, but left much of the underground system alive. For the Marines moving inland, the enemy seemed to come from rock itself. Here, the BAR was not a magic answer. Nothing at Iwo Jima was magic. Flamethrowers, grenades, demolition charges, tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and infantry all became part of the same brutal process. But the BAR gave the small unit a way to live in the open, long enough to apply those other tools. It suppressed the slit. It covered the man with the satchel charge. It held the cave mouth while another Marine crawled close. It kept a defender's head down for the 2 or 3 seconds that decided whether someone crossed a gap or died in it. Those seconds were the real battlefield. And they had been manufactured years earlier. They were manufactured in ammunition plants, in receiver shops, on training ranges, in doctrine offices, in decisions about whether an automatic weapon belonged to a commander as a rare asset or to a squad as part of its body. The Japanese soldier inside the cave might be an excellent marksman. Many were. American reports repeatedly respected Japanese camouflage, patience, fieldcraft, and discipline. Defenders could hold fire until a target came close enough to make the first shot count. But that kind of skill bought delay. It did not change the arithmetic once the position was found. A concealed rifleman could wound a Marine. A patient machine gun team could stop a rush. But once American infantry identified the aperture, the fight became a race between exposure and fire volume. And the BAR shortened that race. At Okinawa, the pattern reached its largest scale. April 1st, 1945. The United States landed against the Japanese 32nd Army in the largest ground battle of the Pacific War. By then, everyone had lessons. The Japanese had seen Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima. They knew what caves could do. They knew what night attacks cost. They knew American firepower could grind forward, even when the attackers suffered badly. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara argued for a defense designed to avoid exposure, delay the Americans, and bleed them from fortified depth. That instinct was correct, but once again, the deeper problem remained beyond the reach of any field officer. You cannot order a different industrial base into existence in the middle of a battle. You cannot manufacture a new ammunition economy by willpower. You cannot teach automatic weapon reflexes to an army that cannot afford to let every recruit burn thousands of rounds before he ever sees combat. American training treated ammunition as a cost of competence. Japanese training often had to treat ammunition as a scarce national substance. That difference followed men into caves. A Marine BAR gunner did not merely know how the weapon worked. He had rehearsed the reload. He knew the weight shift as the magazine emptied. He knew how long a burst could last before the weapon began to climb. He knew how to clear a stoppage fast enough that his fear did not have time to become a decision. That kind of knowledge does not come from slogans. It comes from repetition, and repetition requires supply. The Japanese military culture had asked spirit to fill gaps that industry could not fill. Sometimes spirit did fill them, for an hour, sometimes for a night, sometimes for weeks, but it could not fill a magazine. This is why the BAR matters. Not because it won the Pacific War by itself. It did not. No single infantry weapon did that. The Pacific was decided by ships, aircraft, submarines, code breaking, logistics, artillery, naval gunfire, fuel, food, medicine, replacement pipelines, and the terrifying arithmetic of national production. But the BAR shows the mechanism at human scale. It is one thing to say American industry was larger. It is another to see what that meant at the edge of a cave. A Marine is lying behind coral. His squad leader points to a black opening 10 yards ahead. A rifleman cannot raise his head. A corpsman is dragging a wounded man backward. The defender inside has the advantage of cover, patience, and death ground. Then the BAR gunner shifts forward. 20 rounds go into the mouth. The defender ducks. Another Marine crosses 3 yards. Another magazine clicks in. Another burst holds the slit. The assault team gets close enough. That is the whole mismatch reduced to a few seconds. Not clean, not easy, not bloodless, but repeatable. And repeatable is the word Japan could not answer. Japan could produce courage repeatedly. It could produce discipline repeatedly. It could produce men willing to die in place repeatedly. What it could not produce, in the same way, was portable automatic fire at the same density, backed by the same ammunition, drilled through the same training pipeline, and replaced by the same industrial system when it broke. The Type 96 and Type 99 together numbered in the tens of thousands. American BAR production, conversions, and distribution put automatic rifles into infantry units at a scale that changed how squads moved. The gap was not simply metal against metal. It was doctrine against doctrine. One side still treated the automatic weapon as a controlled support asset. The other was learning to make it the center of ordinary infantry movement. That is why Japanese adaptation can look impressive and still fail. Tarawa produced stronger fortifications. Saipan produced better depth. Iwo Jima produced tunnel warfare of extraordinary sophistication. Okinawa produced a defense designed to punish every American yard. Those were real adaptations. They raised the price. They prolonged the fight. They killed Americans in numbers that still shock anyone who studies the campaigns closely. But they did not solve the underlying equation. If the smallest American units kept arriving with more automatic fire, more ammunition, more replacements, and more practice using all of it, then each Japanese improvement only changed the shape of the killing ground. It did not remove it. That is the tragedy hidden inside the statistics. Japanese soldiers were not defeated because they were weak.
In many places, they endured conditions that were almost beyond imagination. They fought from positions already shattered. They held fire under bombardment. They died in caves with no water, no evacuation, no realistic chance of relief. But the doctrine that had praised their spirit had also trapped them. It had promised that will could overcome material imbalance. It had taught that moral force could close the gap between rifle and machine.
And the islands proved something colder. A man's spirit may decide whether he stands. It does not decide how many rounds his squad can put into the air before the enemy reloads.
William Dean Hawkins, the Marine officer associated with the brutal opening actions at Tarawa, did not live to see the lesson become obvious across the Pacific. He was killed on the island. Many of the men who carried BARs into those bunkers and caves did not survive either. The weapon did not make them invincible. It made a certain kind of movement possible, and that was enough. Because modern war often turns not on the heroic thing everyone notices, but on the dull thing that happens again and again. A magazine fits. A weapon cycles. A squad knows the drill. A factory makes another. A ship brings it forward. A replacement has already fired enough rounds to use it without thinking. That chain ends in a burst of sound from a beach, a ridge, or the mouth of a cave, 20 rounds at a time. Japan heard the sound on island after island, and by the time it understood what the sound really meant, the answer required more than a new tactic. It required a different army, a different economy, a different history. The BAR was not the reason Japan lost the Pacific War. It was where the reason became visible, in the hands of one ordinary infantryman, for 3 seconds, then 3 seconds again, and again, until courage was no longer the variable that decided the fight.